She's the daughter of one of the most influential preachers on the planet. But when controversy surrounding Bishop T.D. Jakes erupted, Sarah Jakes Roberts was left in tears. And now, after months of silence and countless rumors, she's finally breaking her silence, revealing heartbreaking truths about her father, the church, and the pain hidden behind the pulpit. What she just revealed is something you won't believe, and is shaking the faith world to its foundation. Because when your last name is Jakes, it's not just influence you carry, it's a heavy load of expectations, image, and unrelenting pressure. That weight has followed Sarah Jakes Roberts, daughter of the legendary Bishop T.D. Jakes. Since the day she was born, she's known as a best-selling author, a powerful preacher, and a leading voice for women everywhere through her ministry, Women Evolve. But lately, it hasn't been her messages that drew attention, it's been her silence. As accusations and criticism began swirling around Bishop T.D. Jakes, the question on everyone's mind was, where is Sarah? Why hadn't she spoken up? Was she distancing herself, or was there something deeper she was trying to protect? Well, that silence has now come to an end. In a recent podcast interview and a series of deeply emotional social media posts, Sarah Jakes Roberts finally opened up not just about her father's controversy, but about the heartbreak, the confusion, and the spiritual battles taking place behind the scenes. Her words left fans weeping, critics stunned, and followers asking what really happened when no one was watching. In this video, we're breaking it all down. What the controversy around Bishop Jakes is truly about, how Sarah Jakes Roberts privately and then publicly responded, and why this moment is shifting how people view faith, family, and leadership. In the Black church, stay tuned because this is where the truth gets raw. For more than 40 years, Bishop T.D. Jakes has stood as one of the most respected and recognized figures in American Christianity. From founding the Potter's House in Dallas, to writing bestsellers and producing major films, his influence has gone far beyond the church walls. But with fame comes scrutiny, and that scrutiny has reached a breaking point. It began with questions around finances. Longtime critics and some former members started raising red flags about how church funds were being handled. Social media was soon flooded with posts questioning whether donations were supporting the community or funding a life of luxury. Then came a viral clip. Bishop Jakes appeared to make comments that many saw as politically loaded, even manipulative toward his congregation. The clip spread like wildfire across platforms like TikTok, X, formerly Twitter, and YouTube. The internet exploded, but it didn't stop there. An anonymous former staff member released internal documents and emails allegedly pointing to mismanagement and controlling behavior within the Potter's House leadership. These documents haven't been verified by independent sources, but that didn't stop them from spreading fast, raising serious concerns about how things were run behind closed doors, and even allegations of spiritual abuse. Claims included staff being punished for asking questions and pressure to value appearance over authenticity. Some reports even suggest Sarah Jakes Roberts herself was dragged into behind-the-scenes power struggles within the church. Suddenly, the Jakes family found themselves under fire not just as spiritual leaders, but as a brand. For many in their faith community, this was nothing short of heartbreaking. Bishop Jakes had long stood as a father figure for countless Black believers. His teachings on healing, empowerment, and entrepreneurship had helped pull millions out of emotional and mental darkness. Even entertaining the idea that these allegations might hold some truth felt impossible for many. Yet, while controversy surrounding Bishop Jakes raged online, Sarah remained completely silent. She made no posts. She offered no sermons on the issue. She neither defended her father nor criticized him. And that silence only stirred more questions. Was she wounded? Was she protecting a secret? Or was she simply waiting for the right moment? That moment finally arrived in what many now refer to as Chapter 2. We're going to break down the precise moment Sarah Jakes Roberts finally spoke up, and the tears she shed revealed more than any statement ever could. As the storm surrounding Bishop T.D. Jakes reached its peak, the public waited anxiously. Some demanded answers. Others pleaded for Sarah Jakes Roberts to say something, anything. But what few understood was that behind her silence, a storm had been raging. The breakthrough happened during a recent live episode of her podcast. Sitting before an intimate studio audience, Sarah wore soft-colored clothing, her eyes heavy with emotion. She looked straight into the camera and spoke words that immediately hushed the entire room. There's a difference between protecting someone you love, she began, and covering up pain you haven't yet processed. Then came a pause. And then the tears. This wasn't a polished press release. It wasn't an Instagram reel edited for views. This was raw. This was real. This was human. For the first time, Sarah admitted how deeply the conversation's about her father had impacted her. She explained that her silence wasn't indifference, it was survival. In her own words, she was just trying to make it through. She said, "People assume that just because we're in leadership, we don't break. But I had to sit with my pain because the little girl inside me wasn't ready to speak yet. I wasn't ready to face what was being said about my dad, about my family, about me." The room broke into applause, not because she gave them all the answers, but because she gave them honesty. Sarah shared that the last few months had tested her in ways she never saw coming. She spoke about how torn she felt caught between her loyalty to her father and the growing public pressure to make a statement out at one point. She said, "It's hard when your hero turns out to be human. And it's even harder when the world wants to crucify him before they even know the full truth." What made this moment unforgettable wasn't just the emotion, it was the clarity. Sarah wasn't there to deny anything. She wasn't offering a defense. What she gave was something far more rare, a confession of the emotional complexity she was living through. The push and pull of being a daughter, a leader, a public figure, and a hurting human being all at once, she talked about. The late-night calls with her father, calls filled with prayer, tears, and the desperate search to understand what God was doing. She revealed that within their family, some of the conversations had been gut-wrenching, even painful but necessary. This wasn't just a vulnerable moment. For many who watched, it was a turning point. It was the first time they didn't just see Sarah as a preacher or an influencer, but as a daughter in deep pain. Her tears weren't a sign of weakness. They were a revelation. In a world that expects its leaders to be perfect and untouchable, Sarah's honesty was nothing short of revolutionary. And though she didn't give all the details people were hoping for, what Sarah did share turned out to be more impactful than any headline truth wrapped in grace. But here's the twist. After the podcast was released, Sarah's emotional confessions sparked a brand new wave of criticism. Some said she revealed too much. Others claimed she hadn't said enough. Following Sarah Jakes Roberts' heartfelt podcast appearance, the footage quickly went viral. It was clipped, uploaded, and spread across platforms like wildfire. Instagram Reels captured her tearful words. TikTok exploded with commentary and speculation. YouTube reactors dropped their hot takes within hours, and just as expected, the reactions were deeply divided. In fact, the response laid bare how split the faith community had become around this issue. On one end were her devoted supporters, those who viewed her vulnerability as a brave act of spiritual strength. They praised her openness, her composure, and her refusal to air family matters for public entertainment. Comments poured in, saying things like, "This is what real leadership looks like." She didn't justify, and she didn't deny she gave her truth, and that's more than enough. Sometimes pain doesn't need a microphone. It needs room to breathe. Pastors like Dr. Anita Phillips, Dr. Darius Daniels, and gospel voices such as Jonathan McReynolds reshared the moment in support, reminding everyone that even leaders bleed. There was an overwhelming wave of empathy, especially from women in ministry who saw their own hidden battles echoed in Sarah's raw tears. But on the flip side, things got ugly fast. Critics slammed her for avoiding the hard questions, accusing her of using emotion to sidestep the truth. Some said she was masking behind gentle language to dodge accountability. Others outright questioned her spiritual sincerity, claiming she was more interested in guarding her father's image than standing for righteousness. One well-known Christian YouTuber remarked, "Sarah cried, but she didn't clarify. Where's the transparency? Where's the repentance? The church deserves better." And it didn't stop there. Some people began digging into her past, mentioning her teenage pregnancy, her divorce, using those old chapters against her as proof she was always too messy to lead. This wasn't mere criticism. It was personal, it was character assassination. Still, Sarah said nothing for over a week after her podcast dropped. No responses, no tweets, no explanations. Silence once again. But this time, it didn't feel like fear, it felt deliberate. She let the backlash run its course. Insiders close to her ministry shared that during this time, she turned inward, hosting private prayer calls with her Women Evolve team, pulling back on public appearances and even rescheduling an upcoming speaking event. One insider said she was choosing to grieve privately before speaking publicly again. But here's what no one expected: the backlash didn't silence her. It magnified her. Just days after the criticism, Women Evolve saw a noticeable jump in podcast subscriptions. Her YouTube viewership tripled. Women across the globe began opening up, sharing stories of what it's like to protect flawed family members, juggle faith while dealing with pain, and feel invisible within their own churches. Sarah had, without trying, ignited something bigger than a response. She sparked a movement, a deeper conversation about how to hold on to faith in the murky gray areas, about loving someone while still holding them accountable, about honoring those who raised you even when they fall short. This wasn't just about Bishop Jakes anymore. It had become something larger. It had become a reflection of how today's church confronts imperfection. But even as all of this unfolded, the questions continued to linger. Was Sarah still holding something back? What exactly did she mean when she said, "the little girl"? Amy wasn't ready to speak? Long before she ever stepped onto a stage of her own, Sarah Jakes Roberts had been the daughter of a giant from the time she could walk. Her last name came with heavy pressure, towering expectations, and relentless public attention. Her father, Bishop T.D. Jakes, wasn't just a preacher, he was a cultural force, a man who packed out arenas and became a spiritual father to millions. But behind closed doors, Sarah wasn't a follower, she was simply a daughter, watching her father navigate influence, fame, and faith, all while she was still trying to figure out who she was. From an early age, Sarah's life became a clear example of how visibility without the shield of privacy can create deep emotional wounds. At just 13 years old, Sarah became pregnant, an event that turned into one of the most widely publicized moments in her family's history. Christian tabloids ran headlines. Pulpits around the country whispered. People judged. A few prayed. But many more shamed. For most teenagers, a pregnancy would remain a private issue. But for Sarah, it became a scandal directly connected to the Jakes name, and that shame didn't stop when her baby was born. It lingered for years, haunting her relationships, clouding her ministry, undermining her self-worth. In past sermons and interviews, she's spoken openly about how she felt like the letdown of the family, while her father preached to crowds about purpose and destiny. Sarah was quietly battling depression, low self-esteem, and the fear that her life would never align with the divine calling attached to her name. But here's where things get even more layered. Sarah wasn't just trying to heal. She was trying to heal while being watched. Every mistake she made was magnified. Every step scrutinized. Every misstep was labeled rebellion. And even as she started to find her rhythm, writing best-selling books, launching her own conferences, preaching around the world, some people still refused to see her as anything more than the 13-year-old who, in their eyes, had disappointed the bishop. So when she sat down recently and said, "The little girl in me wasn't ready to speak," it wasn't just about the controversy that's currently in the spotlight. It was a reflection of an entire lifetime, one filled with messages telling her to sit quietly, to be strong, and to protect the image of the pulpit, even if it caused her pain. In reality, Sarah's tears weren't just a reaction to the present. They were the culmination of years of emotional buildup. A release long overdue. She'd been holding things in for her family, for the church, for the picture-perfect idea of Black Christian excellence. And now, as a grown woman leading a ministry of her own, she was no longer willing to carry that silent weight. And yet, through it all, she never disrespected her father. She never revealed private details, never made accusations, never lashed out in anger. Instead, she embodied a type of healing rarely seen in public ministry. Accountability rooted in love, honesty wrapped in grace, pain expressed without revenge. But this opens up a much broader conversation, one the church still struggles to fully confront. What happens to a preacher's child when the platform starts to feel like a prison? When your parents' divine calling turns into your personal trauma? When the responsibility to preserve your family's reputation starts costing you your own peace? And maybe the bigger question, what happens when you finally decide that enough is enough? In a world where image often matters more than internal healing, Sarah Jakes Roberts chose a different way. She didn't jump in to defend. She didn't try to spin the story. She let her tears speak not just for herself, but for every daughter, for every preacher's kid, for every woman of faith who's had to suffer quietly, carrying burdens behind the scenes. The controversy around Bishop T.D. Jakes might have started the conversation, but Sarah's response turned it into something far deeper. This wasn't just about scandal. This was about inherited pain, about learning to love someone fully, while still telling the truth, about stepping out of someone else's shadow not to disgrace them, but to finally shine in your own light. She reminded us that even spiritual giants are still human, that standing on a platform doesn't mean you're free from hurt, and that sometimes God does his greatest work right in the middle of our brokenness. And let's be real, her strength wasn't in handling everything perfectly. It was in how truthfully she walked through the mess. So what can we take away from this? Maybe we need to stop demanding perfection from our leaders. Maybe it's time we made room for grief, for slow healing, for complexity. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we truly understood that truth and love can live in the same breath. Sarah Jakes Roberts isn't just surviving the controversy surrounding her father, she's rising in the midst of it. And in doing so, she's leading us into a new kind of church, one where healing is sacred and tears are prophetic. What's your take on Sarah's response? Was she too gentle, or was she exactly the voice the faith community needed in a time like this? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from real people, not just the headlines. If this video resonated with you, if it made you reflect on your own faith, family, or healing process, go ahead and like this video. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this message. Make sure to subscribe to World of Stars for more raw, honest, and eye-opening stories about faith, scandal, and the people behind the pulpits. And don't forget to share this video, because someone out there is still carrying silent pain, and they need to know they're not the only one.